Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Adam Cross, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Southern California. And today I am with a good friend, Michael Gasparro, and a fellow Catholic therapist. And we'll probably talk about it. Michael and I have been able to work together doing a lot of Catholic mental health retreats over the past few years and a few other projects here and there. But Michael, anything you want to say about yourself to introduce yourself today?
Sure, yeah. I'm also, as you mentioned, a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. Excuse me. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and share about some things that have been on my heart. And also, you and I have some stuff possibly coming up soon in the future too together. So just for people who are interested in Southern California to be aware of that.
Yeah, it's been cool getting to do retreats. I think, especially over the past few years, and I think we did another video on retreats that we've done, but just that kind of experience in history and ministry combined with our work as therapists, and it's been awesome to put that together. And yeah, for a lot of people, and that's kind of a different environment, like doing retreats from just therapy work, and definitely encounter people in a new way when it's in the retreat setting. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a little less formal and it allows for a little more spontaneity and personal connection in a way that's a more, in some ways, less rigid, although there's still, of course, professional boundaries and limits as therapists that we keep, but it's still a little bit more ministerial in that way.
and yeah, well, thanks for coming on again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I know we've been talking about a little bit what we're going to talk about today in terms of some exciting stuff that you have going on, but also just kind of bigger picture of how do we introduce the good news in terms of our bodies and sexuality, and especially how do we catechize and form young people in this too. But you've been doing a lot in this area and going on other podcasts like Lila Rose's podcast and a few times. And so talk to me about, yeah, like what is your passion here? And I guess kind of jumping into it a little bit, like what do you want people to understand with this topic?
The thing that comes to my mind first is body soul unity. It's something that I didn't really learn much as a kid, or at least I don't consciously remember being talked about in that way. I'm sure I learned it. I mean, we learn a lot of things that we forget, but as a kid, I just kind of didn't even think about what it meant, like soul, body, what's the difference? I don't know. We have a soul. And it's funny because I wrote, as we're going to talk about later, music for children on a children's album using the standards of Christian anthropology as published by a couple of organizations, the Ruah Woods Institute in collaboration with the Cardinal Newman Society. They published these Christian anthropology standards, which were taking concepts of Christian anthropology and theology of the body and kind of boiling them down into small bite-sized age-appropriate lessons for children, and that kind of undergirded the development of this music to support those lessons that I wrote. And I learned a lot while writing them. I was like, wow, I never thought about that. And I think when you have to boil things down for children to understand them, it actually ends up revealing the ways that I needed new, deeper, richer understanding myself. And that term body soul unity, even Pope Francis recently quoted a theologian in one of his recent documents on the Sacred Heart of Jesus, called it a corporo spiritual being. So I know that's not the only term we can use, but it refers that body soul unity. Well, in today's age, we need to be reminded of these basic truths, and children especially need to learn them as, in some ways, antidotes to secular ideologies that are ancient but resurfacing. So, nothing's new under the sun. So we shouldn't think, oh, there's these brand new, heresies. Really, most things that are heretical or confusing have already come and gone, and they just emerge in kind of new skin. And so that one in particular, that I can be born in the wrong body. My body is not my own. That is a deep, deep and ancient heresy that is harmful to children and confusing. It's harmful to adults, but especially to children who have no anchor point and have not been really given the sense of self that they need to have throughout childhood already.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. And it's kind of crazy the timing of all this because I know this is something that's been on your heart. Obviously, you've been producing music for kids. And so this is something that you've really been thinking and preparing on a lot. But just the timing too in my own life, because I was taking a metaphysics course over the summer and now I'm taking a theology of the body course as I'm wrapping up my master's. But just even the natural flow of that, like that's not the progression of classes that someone usually takes, but I feel like I walked away from the metaphysics portion really with the emphasis of what, like, we are a composite, unified being, body and soul, right? And that's not meant to be separated out, right? And when it is, that's death. Like it's literally death. Like that's how bad it is if we try to separate body and soul. Um, and so I've been taking that away. And then I was, the previous episode I did here with a friend of mine, Colby Young, who's, about to be an associate LPCC or not LP, APCC. Um, he's really big on embodiment prayer and like, how do we use our bodies? How do we associate with our bodies to process our emotions and to make sense of our experiences and work through trauma? And so I think it's really cool. It's like a natural flow, almost like this season of my life where the focus is on the importance of being like corporal beings, right? And I forget that term you use, but yeah, like we are body and soul, and both are so good, right? That the soul has the primacy. That's God's intention. Original sin, the body rebels against the soul often. Um, but we are called to be this unified being, and the body expresses the goodness of the person, right? That is not visible. The body carries with it that dignity of the person as a human being. So I think, man, I'm just like really grateful. It seems like it's just natural progression. God's like put these things in my life, and then it sounds like you too. Um, but has there been anything for you that's really sparked that interest? Like, like in the past few years where you're like, this resonates with me. This is a reminder that I need in my life of my goodness and my corporal presence and God as God's creation.
I I felt like a surge of emotion in me a little bit when you said that because I noticed this sort of I love this prayer I read from St. John Paul II that it is Jesus who stirs within you the desire for fullness that will not let you settle for compromise. And he is the beauty to which you are so attracted. He also says in that same kind of prayer to young people. And I just didn't even believe I was allowed to want to have the desire for the. So, okay, human beings were all born with this innate desire for happiness. It's innate. God made us that way. And I was against myself for a long time. Like, I'm not allowed to want to be happy. And any striving for a sort of longing for fullness that won't let me settle for compromise was really in my mind just all of it was ego and narcissism or something. And I was just like kind of shutting that down from a spiritual lens, saying to myself, you're not supposed to want to be happy. You're not supposed to care about greatness. You're supposed to be meek and humble, and that's it, and shut up and sit down and follow the program. And again, it's complex, but there is, if we're embodied, so body, soul, and we're created and ordered to desire happiness, we need to take that seriously as Christians. And instead of being divided against ourselves, understand how it's really a pattern, a way that God made us in order to find Him. So that's what JP2 is acknowledging. St. John Paul II sort of telling us don't dismiss the desire for fullness. Don't dismiss the dream for beauty. Don't dismiss the longing for the deepest happiness you feel, but rather when nothing else satisfies you, try to understand that it's Jesus who you seek. And so, but instead of saying, but no, I don't really want to be happy, it doesn't really matter. That's for the next life. Because we're then that you kind of chop yourself up, you like chop your nose off to spite your face. And Thomas Aquinas says that my friend who's a philosopher, Dr. Chris Kaiser, kind of summarized saying the acknowledging you want to be happy is the beginning of the spiritual life. And that doesn't go away. that longing for happiness. And I think that somehow relates to this embodied spiritual uh, body unity that we're talking about. It's this when we feel that longing, it's physiological. It has a movement in our being, and that gives us energy. It energizes our whole body towards the good we seek and away from evil. So we need to be attentive to how those emotions and those longings emerge physiologically, not just intellectually.
Yeah, that's really good. And as you were saying that, well, my brain kind of went to scrupulosity, which I know we both work with and have some experience with.
Personal experience with too. Yeah.
Yeah. No, same. And I've heard people say, yeah, that guilt around wanting to be happy, right? Like, and I know we've talked about this in our retreats that we've done, is we can't mistake the goodness that God brings out of suffering for suffering being goodness. And I think sometimes, especially people who lean towards that scrupulous side, can confuse that and say, no, suffering is good, right? Like I'm not supposed to be happy. And it's like, oof, like I kind of I understand what you're getting at, but that's not the wholeness of it, right? Is we're not called to be suffering. Like that's not the intent, but that is a part of our broken nature. God is absolutely using that.
And he allows.
Yeah. He allows it so he can bring good fruit, out of that for our salvation, for our greatest good. And you mentioned like that's physical too, which I think is interesting because you probably don't think about that as much. But how do you see that playing out physically or physiologically in that desire for fulfillment or that enjoying happiness?
Yeah, like isn't it partly the resurrection of the body idea that we believe as, first of all, let me just say, I am sort of skeptical by default on a lot of things in life. I don't know if that makes me like just anxious or that's because I'm like an intellectual or a little bit of both. But it's I think Jesus really knew how badly I needed help because had like mystical experience. I don't want to sound like I'm Saint Teresa or something like that, but like I had mystical experiences in my youth in like high school where I was forced out of my skeptical mindset enough to where my constant skepticism since then has been like curbed by the Lord. And I say that because one of the hardest things for me to believe as a Catholic has been the resurrection of the body and the life of the world to come. It was easier for me to believe that there's a God, that he created us, and that he wants us to kind of follow his program, and that we're going to die, and like who knows what happens after that. I'm being honest. That was like that's easier for me to believe. But the idea that this very mystical, supernatural, beautiful, but wildly difficult to believe truth that the church professes in our creed, the resurrection of the body and the life of the world to come, that changes things. And it's in scriptures, it's in every page of the New Testament. It's sort of even St. Paul saying, if there is no resurrection, then we are the greatest fools of all. And not just a spiritual resurrection, a physical resurrection. So that says to me, if we reverse engineer that, that it matters now too. Like if it matters enough for it to be resurrected in a glorified state, it has implications for how we live our lives on earth as it is in heaven. And so I don't even fully understand what those implications are, but I'm saying out loud all these things to encourage myself and people listening. If we have residual kind of holdouts about these mystical, supernatural, but beautiful elements of the faith, one, there may be more rational and reasonable elements to those beliefs than we even realize. But two, when it goes beyond reason towards this element of faith that is really steeped in our trust in God, it has beautiful implications for our flourishing right now.
Yeah, that's really good. So there's something really important to pay attention to and like how we're feeling and our own experiences, like physically and mentally, emotionally, our whole self now, and not just kind of wait for that to happen. It's like what's going on now really matters.
Well, and I answered you in a very esoteric way, but to kind of set the stage, the kind of practical follow up to that is what are emotions? And emotions are faculties that are gifts from God to help us choose the good and avoid evil. And that is our his gift to us on earth en route to unity with him in heaven. So again, if we can just see them as a gift, and within the emotions, I'm talking about the desire for happiness, the long that's part of the realm of the emotions, the desire, love, desire, joy, hate, aversion, sadness, courage, fear, hope, despair, and anger. Those are what Thomas Aquinas defined as the passions. So in the realm of the heart is where kind of things all get started with our relationship with God.
Yeah. And I guess this might be going back, but when you're talking about the resurrected body, I remember going to Steubenville, San Diego when I was youth minister, taking some teens, and Father Mike Schmitz was there, and he was giving a talk on essentially what the resurrected body will do. And he was describing, he's like, Jesus could teleport. Like he could be in one place and then instantly be in the other, right? And he can bilocate, right? And he can still eat, right? Like he's eating fish. He can go through walls, right? Like the ascension is him like literally flying into heaven, right? And so Father Mike Schmidt's describing like the resurrected body. I was just like, I got so pumped. I was like, can we talk more about this? Because I want to fly and I want to be able to teleport, and like, and then putting it in this context of like a whole new creation, it's mind blowing. It's like, okay, God is going to make all things new, right? And that's our bodies, but that's also just all of creation, like together. And that I can't comprehend. Like you're saying, like that's really hard to believe, but that's exciting to me. That's like hopeful. That's like I want to ride a dinosaur. Can I do that? Is is that how it's gonna be? I don't know, but there's an excitement there. I'm like, wow, we need to talk more about this. So yeah, and I like what you're saying about the emotional piece too. It's like paying attention to what has God given us, um, and bringing it back to the now. It's like all of what we're experiencing really matters, and there's purpose and there's intent and there's a final end for us, right? To be with God, to be that new creation for all eternity with the beatific vision. And I guess maybe really bringing this back and, and kind of shifting the focus a little bit, because we were talking about too is like, well, how do we proclaim this goodness and truth to others? But specifically, like you said in the beginning, we live in a society and a culture that there's a radical dualism of like body versus soul, right? And if you feel like your soul doesn't match your body, you customize your body, right? And we have medical technology that allows for that like super easily. It's scary how easy that is, but especially for parents out there who are encountering this or these ideologies. So I know that might be a big pivot. It's like,
Oh, it isn't. It isn't really. Because, well, one thing that comes to mind, not to step on your toes, but is that when we're talking about the realm of the emotions, I'd add it is the nature of the passions to be guided by reason. It's their nature. They need to be guided by reason. And man either governs his passions, becomes happy, or they govern him and he becomes unhappy. So when I talk about the emotions being a gift to help us choose good and avoid evil, that's under the aegis, under the like sort of rubric that we, as the church says, would by God's grace over time grow in our capacity to guide them towards right, with our reasoning, towards right action through the virtue of prudence, among other things. And it's all anchored in grace. That's what's really important in this conversation is children are not educated by their parents on their own. God is with you. But with the emotions and the embodiment of the emotions, children, they only know you're a dad. I don't have children. They literally only care about what makes them happy. I mean, they don't really know how to think of yet, especially 2, 3, 4 years old. It's just like, what do I like? What do I not like? I want what I want. I don't want what I don't want. They don't really get hung up on like, I shouldn't want this or I shouldn't want that. Right? Or is that off to say?
yeah, absolutely. There's not like that meta thought that's like, why do I like this? Maybe I shouldn't. It's just like, I want more chocolate. I want more Halloween candy. Yeah.
And so with children, the body soul unity is connected with how we guide and coach our children over time, how to receive the input from their senses and teach them to guide it towards right action. So their emotions and body soul unity are all connected in this general raising of our children in ways that helps them accept and appreciate the goodness of who they are, body and soul, and all the faculties that come with that, including the emotions, and that they need to be guided. And with children, that they learn that gradually and over time and gently, and they learn through trial and error. And we should not expect children to have an integrated emotional life beyond what they're capable of based on their age.
Yeah. And that implicitly kind of stands out to me implicitly, like they just have that integration as kids. Like they're not thinking like, oh, I can do this to my body, or I'm that. It's just like they just are who they are, and they have that egocentrism as children. It's just, like you're saying, like this is what I desire. And but there's something very simple about being a child and just saying like, yeah, I'm me, like. And I remember I asked my daughter maybe like 2 years ago. She's almost 5 now, but I was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was just interested to see what she'd say. And she was like, I want to be me when I grow up. I'm just like, oh man, that's so cute. That's so special. Like she's just like, oh, I'm just gonna be me. Like I am me, like no matter what I do, I'm me. And I'm like, yeah. And I think sometimes we can forget that, like, and especially with some of these ideologies coming in and saying like, well, no, maybe you're this, maybe you're that, question this, question that. That's where it gets confusing. But yeah, we need children and adults, but especially children, they need that formation, they need that parenting that helps them to understand, like you're saying, the proper ordering of their passions, guide and how to guide the passions with God's grace. That it's that development of self-mastery, but also self-understanding of the body. And that's my understanding of chastity is that integration of body and soul, where the soul is rightly with God's grace and yeah, and help ordering our desires, right? Ordering the desires of our body so that we're not, overeating and becoming gluttonous, or we're not, using the body and becoming lustful, right? And so there's that goodness and really the primacy of our soul and God's grace, right, over just our simple desires. And that's where it can be hard with kids. Sometimes I want this and that's it, but they need that guidance, that fatherhood, that motherhood um, to form them in virtue. So I don't know, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the will is seeks the apparent good. And so I think parents should also trust that the good is more attractive than evil ultimately. And so that they can trust that they don't need to be fearful when parenting, and that in training their children towards integration, the kids default to accepting themselves, I am me, yes, but then with the passions, they also default to just letting them dominate them completely. So gently and gradually over time, we teach through like example primarily. Parents teach through example mostly, and receptivity to their children's experiences, mirroring them in their wild emotions instead of just, angrily shutting them down. They help them learn to be mirrored, to be integrated, to learn that I am me because my dad sees me, and I am me because my mom sees me. We learn who we are through the eyes of another. And so, in that training, like you're talking about, self mastery is not about shutting down our children's emotions. It's about giving them space to have them, even in age appropriate ways, like a temper tantrum. It's not the end of the world. It might be embarrassing in public, but it's not the end of the world. The only thing that you have to step in my opinion, as a parent, is when things start happening where they're hurting themselves or others or property. Yeah, you need to put boundaries. Like my sister says, it's really helped her to think about with children and teaching self mastery over the emotions. It's her job to keep her son safe and secure, not to keep him happy. So there are limits she sets to help offer that security and safety, but he's allowed to be sad. He's allowed to be angry. He's allowed to have an age appropriate temper tantrum. And it's not as disturbing to her anymore because she's not like thinking of that as evidence she's done something wrong. It's just a normal process And then reflecting that back to children helps them to learn to integrate and master their passions. It's not through anger and shutting it down. So, for instance, your kid's crying, "Oh, so and so hit me. I'm so angry. Johnny hit me." Just toughen up. You need to get over it. No, that's rejecting and sort of denying your child's experience. It's not going to help them integrate their emotions. Rather, the tender glance, the look, the touch, not even just in words, receptivity to your child's experience as they are, their goodness in their disintegration of, like, being wildly ruled by their passions. You might just be open to their goodness as a child, and that might elicit a normal and healthy response. Like, "I'm so sorry. That must have hurt really bad. Tell me about it." That enough will help teach them to integrate more than any kind of like forced shutdown of their expression of emotions that you perceive are too wild for their age or something.
Yeah, that's really good. And if we are made in the image and likeness of God, and if we are beloved sons and daughters of the Father in baptism, we are good, right? Like we are made good, although broken. But that means that our emotions are allowed to be there. Like it's not like we shouldn't have any emotions, get rid of this completely. This is bad. It's like, no, we are good. So there is space for this. There, like these are intended. God has given us emotions to reveal something to us. And that's big for, I think, a lot of people. I think we kind of just assume, or it's easy for parents, and obviously, especially parents are overwhelmed by their kids' emotions to just be like, stop feeling that way or stop doing that, you know? But it's like, no, this is good. What is being revealed here to the kid, right? There's a self-revelation, right? But also to the parent, there's communication going on. So that's really valuable. And like you're saying, that could be a moment to recognize, no, like you are good, even if you're having a negative emotion, right? And that negative emotion actually is important. And so I can get curious about why you're having that negative emotion. And yeah, it's interesting you're saying that because right now my youngest is 2.5 or a little bit older than 2.5. And some days she like I'm almost seeing like she comes alive, like all she's like soaking so much in. And then some days she'll just be like so articulate and talk so much. And I'm like, whoa, where did this come from? Um, and that's actually sparked me because she's 2.5. She still has temper tantrums, right? Um, but that's kind of sparked me like when she is screaming and she can scream, man, like that's a gift. I'm like, how do you hit that? Like hit that pitch. And my Apple Watch is always telling me like you're gonna suffer, hearing loss if you stay in this environment too long. And I'm like, well, guess I'm gonna lose my hearing. But because she's becoming more and more articulate, I've kind of been taking steps with her to say, hey, like can you tell me what happened? Like I hear and you're sad. Oh man, that sounds like it really hurt. Can you use your words? Can you tell me what's going on? Like where does it hurt in your body, or what made you sad? Because I'm seeing her take these steps and being able to formulate stuff. So I'm also trying to match that while still validate, which is really interesting because a part of me is like, oh, I don't want to be dismissive, but like that pitch hurts my ears. Can we use our words? So it's kind of crazy when you're seeing it day to day play out.
Yeah, and you're learning through trial and error as a parent, and they're also learning through trial and error and trial and success as children. So, you don't have to be perfect, but it's worth trying to be receptive to your children's emotional expressions, even if it's hard and uncomfortable, because that's the only way they know how to voice their wants and needs. And so, if we're not receptive to them as they are, and at least mirroring them back to themselves and then guiding gently, they might implicitly or explicitly get this message like, "I'm not allowed to want or need things." And that kind of can turn into this sort of like, "I'm not valuable," or "I don't matter," or and so it's really unfortunately often the case. I'm going to shut down this by spanking my child very hard and angrily, and yeah, you can stop somebody from crying by doing that for a little bit, but then they might just learn that they're not allowed to want or need things, and that's gonna they're gonna pay a price for that later as they have to overcome that deficit.
One thing I like about internal family systems and parts work is that just kind of the notion of an internal critic and an internal dismisser. And so if a child, yeah, like you're saying, learns like I'm not important, my sadness isn't okay to express, or my anger isn't okay to express, that's that's formed internally by these external experiences of that, right? And it might not be a parent saying, hey, be quiet, I don't want to hear it, but it could be very much implied by a parent, right? Even if a parent's like, oh, I am so tired of this, or rolling your eyes, or sighing, or like there's a lot of things that can communicate to a kid like, I don't want to hear your feelings. I don't want to, like, your anger is bad, or your sadness is bad, or even your anxiety is bad. And so internally, a kid makes a note of that and says, okay, over time, dismiss that, shove that anger down because mom, dad doesn't want that, right? Or ignore that anxiety because that's not okay to express. And so that becomes an internal voice that says, do push this thing away, right? Whether it's through criticism or just ignoring or dismissing, so that mom and dad don't reject that externally, right? So it's like a protective measure. Um, but I'm curious, Michael, I guess zooming out, like we're talking about being unified beings. We're kind of talking about emotions, and I think maybe people could be listening to this and thinking, okay, how do we bridge that gap? It's like the body's good, but we're talking about emotions. How do you how do we see that as this composite being?
All emotions have a physiological response in the body. So when any of the emotions are aroused, there and so at minimum, we need to allow as adults the physiological response to occur like a wave moving through our body. All emotions don't need to be expressed or gratified in order, for us to be at peace, but they need to at minimum be received, acknowledged, accepted, even thanking God for them. Because in receiving, acknowledging, accepting, and thanking God for them, we then can ask for the grace to guide them prudentially towards expressions of them or not expressing them in ways that are respectful to God, ourselves, and others. And so the body soul unity means that we should receive all of our faculties that are gifts and thank God for them. And there are, the five senses we have. Thomas Aquinas says we have four internal senses as well. But within all of those sensory inputs, the emotions get aroused. And like I said, they're faculties, they're messengers, they're meant to be guided, but they help us express and do good and avoid evil. So the soul, we're talking about body soul unity. So tying it back to that again, the soul is invisible. You cannot see the soul. And that's what I actually was also like with these children's songs, learning about like basic Catholic ideas of body and soul unity that I had just never really meditated on before. Silly me, I guess, but the body makes visible the invisible truths of God and the love of the soul. So the way we show the love our soul has for God and others is through the body. And emotions are part of the faculties we have to help us give energy to do that. And so these things are related in that sense. And if we say, okay, the soul's invisible and the truths of God that are invisible are revealed through the visible body and expressed through the visible body, but I don't want to use this gift God gave me to help me do it, then you're kind of making things harder than they need to be through the sheer act of will. Because, by the way, sin enters in the realm of the will, which is the realm of the intent and the action. So you can sheer willpower, as they say, alone, still do something that you don't feel like doing. And that's good. It's not necessarily bad. That's kind of where especially as parents, you probably rely on agape. Like, I really don't want to get up at 3 a.m. to feed my child, but yeah. So it's like, we can act contrary to our emotions. It's just that God gave us their emotions to help support right action. And so that's where the willpower part is strengthened by the emotional realm, but is not totally dependent on it to reveal the invisible realities of the soul, which is love of God and love of neighbor, which is only because we were loved first. I think that's also worth mentioning that we love because we were first loved, and that never is it like self-help to the point of I'm going to start things up. It's like, no, we need to be like Dr. Sean Tobin, our friend, has been talking about recently. Sin is not something we can heal ourselves from, but rather it's a condition we need to be redeemed out of, and that at every level of our being is going to be continually renewed in Christ.
And Michael, just the wealth of what you just shared. like uh, I'm just no, but I'm hearing your knowledge and your expertise and experience, even just sharing, about Aquinas and but also these really personal truths. I think it's really valuable. There's so much to chew on from what you just said, which is amazing. So thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm still learning it too.
The head knowledge to the heart knowledge, right? It's like, okay, I have all these ideas, but then how do I live that out? And I just want to highlight too what you said in the beginning. I think you bridged it perfectly, right? And I think we could miss it, but it's like, okay, what's the connection between the emotions that we're talking about, our inherent goodness, and then the body, right? Theology of the body, being corporal beings, body, mind, and soul. What's that bridge? And you said that what happens with one affects the other, right? What happens with our emotions, what happens with our experiences, trauma, beliefs that, that we have, things we encounter, that is physically expressed and held in the body, right? And there is so much research, especially in the past, I think like 30 years, that shows the effects of trauma on the body, right? Not just the brain, but on our physical bodies, on sexuality, on, just normal functioning. So I think that piece is huge for us to all hear and kind of soak in, is that if we dismiss, if we invalidate, if we ignore, if we shame the emotions and we don't have the affirmation of the person on the emotional, mental level, spiritual level, our bodies actually break down, right? Our bodies, there's that disintegration and disordering of between body and soul that I think is really, really important to kind of emphasize. Like, it can't be, I have to go on a diet and eat well and exercise, and then I can criticize myself all day long and I'll be fine. Mentally, it's like, no, we need this honoring and greater reverence and respect for God's creation of our body, because our body is who we are, right? Our body isn't something we have. It's someone. Our body is us. And our body is learning, has sign value, right? Like you were saying, our body reveals the inner person. It's a visible sign revealing the invisible reality of the soul. And it also points to God as our creator, right? We're made in his image and likeness. So our body actually reveals God, right? It reveals truths of God and his love and his mercy and his creative powers and his strength and all these things. But yeah, so I'm curious for you, taking all this, like it's a really important backdrop and foundation. It's like, how did you get to the point where you were like, I'm going to write children's songs to convey these truths?
I don't remember if it was me or my friend Father Gerard that first told me that he thought this was a good idea, but somewhere along the line, I worked a lot with kids. I was in music ministry for years, and I was in music education, teaching voice and piano lessons and children's music camps and children's caroling groups, and I did all kinds of music with kids for many years, kind of even without even intending it after college, just kind of fell into, I mean, I made choices, but just sort of like didn't really plan ahead for that. I wasn't always thinking of that growing up. It's what I did for a long time before I became a therapist. And so I have this backdrop of music and children and working with kids in that way. And and then I also remembered as a child, I did all kinds of music vacation Bible school where I would remember Bible verses, and I still have them. Like I could queue up several. Um, be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. I think it's Joshua 1:9 or something like that. So my point is, I was like thinking I'm 37. I have all these little things that I learned when I was like in second and third grade that I remember. And so it just reminded me that music is a way of inculcating beautiful truths in ways that can stick with people. And why not? So yeah, like these truths are needed more than ever lately with children. So that's what inspired me, is those combination of factors.
Dude, that's awesome. Because yeah, when you're saying that, I totally resonate with vacation Bible schools songs being stuck in your head, and you do not forget them. You really don't. And even just like the aspect, which is kind of cool, of like music therapy, especially with people who have dementia or Alzheimer's, and they'll play a song and it'll bring them back. And I saw this video of someone doing it was almost similar. It was, this poor woman has like severe Alzheimer's, doesn't remember her own children's names, doesn't recognize anybody. But one of her kids asked her, "Who is Jesus?" And instantly she's like, "Jesus is my savior. He died for me." And she kept like proclaiming the gospel. And it was like this like recall, you know. So hearing that that's behind your motivation and like your mission there, that makes so much sense. And that's really cool. It's like these are truths that they sink in almost like we're not even always aware of the reality that we're sinking in.
Well, and a lot of the music that I mean, I have nephews, several nephews, and like a lot of the music that I see them playing, it's not that it's bad, but it's just kind of irrelevant to like anything really beautiful.
Or it is bad.
Yeah, some of it is bad. And so yeah, like I mean, I'd love to share can I share one of the songs we mentioned that's related to our topic? I'll do a little acapella.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So this song is called I think it's what is this one I titled God Gave Me Me. And it's the first one I wrote for that ended up being this album. The album is 12 songs. They're educational, they're themes that build on each other. I'm still working with curriculum partners to try to pair them with lesson plans, but they could be downloaded now through my website. That's the only place they're available right now, which you can maybe link in the description of the video. But these songs are meant to be educational for children and families. Like the verses, for instance, are a little more complex. Some of them are a little bit above 2 to 6 year old age range, which is the target audience, to kind of steep mom and dad's mind in some of these ideas, to have points of conversation and reflection. Because I learned when I was writing them too. So I figured maybe adults might benefit as well. And last thing I'll say is they're intentionally written to be less annoying than most children's music. Now, I'm not saying they won't be annoying. They may be annoying, but at least I wrote with songs for me that I liked. So I was like, what would be like beautiful melodies that I would have fun listening to and singing so that they could be enjoyable for the family and not be so grating. But if they are grating, you can also put your children's headphones on if you want. So, but this one's called God Gave Me Me. Okay, you ready? God gave me my body and I like it. God gave me my soul, they're both mine. They are one, and that's what makes me me. And God loves me all the time. Your soul you cannot see, but God gives it to you freely. It gives life to your body. Your soul can love completely. Oh, God gave me my body and I like it. God gave me my soul. They're both mine. They are one, and that's what makes me me. And God loves me all the time. I said, thank you, God, for all you've given me. And we love you all the time.
Man, standing ovation, even though I'm sitting.
Just a little sample of the some of the sentiment of the music.
Yeah, thank you for singing that. Honestly, that's awesome just to even have that glimpse. And I think I'm amazed by the intentionality behind it too, because we can listen to so much music and just not care about what it says or the message, but what you just sang and wrote is like so intentional to the gospel, and to what's true about our bodies and who we are. And all just the human anthropology that you just packed into a children's song and just made it super simple and just like affirming. That's impressive. That's really cool.
Dude, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And it's been a definitely prayerful process trying to like be open to how to write these things. And I'm still learning, and hopefully the next batch that's coming out will be even better. It's tricky to balance simplicity with complexity of these truths. So yeah, I'm learning as I go too, as a composer for children's music. But I hope the way they came out can be an inspiration and at least an encouragement for families to start, have something to grab. And what's interesting, and I'm not saying this to my own horn, but like there is not a lot of music like this out there. I mean, I looked, I was like, how much of a niche is this? Is there theology of the body music for kids that talks about these things? And I cannot find it. And so, I mean, I'm sure there's some, but just there's a dearth. There's a need. Like most of the kids' music I found, it's not that it's bad to just be general praise music. If it's Christian music, awesome. It's praising God, teaching them to praise the Lord, but it's very little that like addresses his body soul unity and some of these deeper truths for children. So even if it's not just me, maybe somebody listening to this will start writing more of their own music. It doesn't need to be a one-man show here. Maybe this can inspire others to write more music like this.
Yeah. Well, and you're so right. So right. There's a deficit and a hunger for content that focuses on a Catholic anthropology that is easily consumable, right? Especially for kids, because there's so much out there that is saying the body is whatever you make it, and your body doesn't have a purpose, and it's essentially a tool. And for the church not to just to come in as a defense, but to proclaim the beauty of your body is not just what you have, it's who you are. And there is an end goal, there is a purpose. Like you are given your sexuality, your body, reproductive abilities for a reason, for a purpose, to be properly understood and loved and ordered with God's grace. It's like, man, we need that more than ever. And we don't want it to just be the defense, right? Like, well, no, it's not that. It's like, so you proclaiming and using that gift of song is literally like a proclamation of beauty of the truth and goodness of the body, which I love. And learning about theology of the body, I just see this continual theme that I think is good to emphasize. Is just that the human person in body and soul has inherent and intrinsic dignity and value that cannot be taken away, that cannot be altered by circumstance, right? If someone's brain dead, they don't lose their value as a human, right? Or if they're unborn, it's not like they don't have value yet. So the theology of the body is just proclaiming, it's like we're as being made in the image and likeness of God, we have this value and reverence, right, due to us because of the gift that God has given us with our life. So anything we can do to uphold that and honor other people, it starts with honoring ourselves, honoring our emotions, honoring our bodies. That's amazing. So it's creating this culture of life, in this really broader context of just like, what does it mean to be human and how good is it to be fully human, which points back to Christ. But yeah, man, thank you so much for sharing everything and for doing everything you're doing, right? For writing these songs and singing, and we'll have to do more of these podcasts. I know we're busy, but we make it happen. And we got some retreats in the works, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to more conversations. And
Same. And if people want to check out my resource, they can go to my website, like I mentioned. There's a chance I might be streaming in the future through some Catholic platforms, but that's not certain at all yet. So at this point, the only way to listen to them is to download them, or they can follow me on Instagram. I do post samples of the songs, but I'm an independently producing Catholic musical artist. So if you are listening to this and want to support my work, you can also download the album. But unfortunately, I don't have any kind of, not on Spotify. It's not on streaming yet at this point. So that's just a little bit more about the details of that project.
awesome. And what is your website?
Just my name, www.michaelgasparro.com.
Awesome. Cool. And if you are watching this or listening, you have any comments or questions for myself or Michael, feel free to leave them below or give this episode a share for anybody that you think would resonate or is in need of it. And I also love just even hearing all this today. If you're listening and you have some topic suggestions, I love hearing kind of video suggestions or questions that people have to make more videos like this on. So, but thank you so much for watching, and thank you, Michael, again for being here. And we'll
Yep,
see you next time. God bless.
absolutely. You too.